Hello, everybody. Chris Profi, Musically Obsessed. As you can see, I have my good friend here, Brendon Snyder. How's it going, Brendon?
Good. How are you, Chris?
Doing good. And we are going to be talking about what I feel is the all-time best rock album. And but before we get into that, if you are new to my channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you can continue to follow my musical adventure that we're all going on here, right? And also, I'm going to leave the link to Brendon's channel below too. Please go on over and check out Brendon Snyder. He's got a great channel. As you can see from his background, he listens to all different types of bands and artists, and I'll let him talk about that. I guess I'll let you talk about that right now, actually, Brendon.
Okay. Yeah, just for some context, I've got over 9,000 CDs as well as vinyl and cassettes. And my musical interest, Chris, as you were saying, it spans all different stuff, from 60s rock on up through present day kind of rock and everything like, glam rock, prog rock, hard rock, melodic rock, AOR, but then also, metal, punk, new wave, alternative, and it just goes. And part of what we're going to get into here, though, is how difficult it was to try to narrow this down to picking one album, the all-time best rock album. I'm sure it was
Right.
difficult for you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and it's if we had to whittle it down to even like five, it would be difficult, but we're
Right.
choosing one. And I just want to let the viewers know out there that this is my choice, and but I also want to say too that this was not an easy decision. And like Brendon, I listened to everything. Like I listened to metal, rock, alternative punk, Broadway show tunes, folk music, jazz, everything. So like when I was thinking about the all-time best rock album, I mean, I had a lot of bands and albums that were going through my head. I had the Beatles' White Album and the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, and even bands like Aerosmith and AC/DC, and the list goes on. Pink Floyd. I mean, there's so many bands, so many albums. It's very difficult. So this decision wasn't made lightly. It wasn't made like, oh, I'm just going to pick an artist out of the air. Like with my different types of music that I like, I kind of looked at everything and chose this record. So I'm just going to come right out and show you guys what I feel is the all-time best rock album, and that's going to go to Kiss's debut.
Nice. Yep.
Now, I understand there's probably a lot of people out there, and Brendon and I were talking about this. You either like Kiss or you don't like Kiss. Like there's really
There's no in between, really. There's not.
Yeah.
There's no casual Kiss fans.
No, but and I said this to Brendon before we started shooting today, that whether you like Kiss or not, you cannot discard the influence that they had on rock, metal, all different types of music. And then with this album, I've gone on record saying Love Gun is my favorite Kiss record. But if I was going to pick the all-time best rock album and best, that would fit into that category, I'd have to go with the debut. This is a greatest hits of Kiss.
Yeah, it's got 10 tracks on it, right?
Yeah, and here we go. Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Let Me Know, Kissin' Time, Deuce, Love Theme from Kiss. It ends with 100,000 Years and Black Diamond. I mean,
two of the greatest Kiss songs ever, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so let's even go beyond the music.
Right.
The stage show of Kiss, their makeup, the way that their concerts were performed, the thought that went into their pyro and lighting show. I mean, you've got to agree with me, Brendon, that went on to influence so many bands.
Oh, I don't think we would have the 80s music scene with the bombastic lights and pyro and everything going on if it hadn't been for Kiss. They were doing things that no other 70s bands at the time were doing. That album in particular, 47 years old at this point. So in 74, when they were coming out, they were doing it then. It wasn't like something they developed and came in the late 70s with. These guys came to the stage prepared from the, when they were a club band, they were already doing this kind of stuff. And it just shows you how influential they were.
and I don't want to focus too much on the makeup and the stage show, because a lot of people would say, "Oh, that was what that Kiss could only do that. Like Kiss wouldn't have been good if it wasn't for the makeup and the stage show." Let's get into the songs here. I mean, the songs
Right. Yep.
to me are timeless, and
Mhm.
what I like about these songs is they're straight and to the point. There's no bells and whistles. It's just rock and roll songs, guitar,
Right.
bass,
Mhm.
vocals, drums. I mean, it's just 3 minutes,
Yeah,
you're in and out.
to a degree, they're like an AC/DC in that you know what you're going to get with Kiss. The song structure and the way that it is, they don't fool around, and there's just that kind of style and brand with what they're
Right.
doing. And the song opener, Strutter, is one
Yep.
of the best all-time songs, a perfect opener in my opinion. Big over the top, sound to it, but Paul Stanley's vocals are just outstanding on that one.
Definitely. And, we were talking a little bit before we started filming too about how many bands Kiss's music has influence. And it's not just like some people might say, oh, well, they just influence glam rock or hair metal. No, like Anthrax will cite Kiss as a reference. And
Pantera does.
yeah, I
Both
mean, even
Vinnie Paul and Dimebag, both of them were huge Ace Frehley fans. And
right. So it goes into thrash, it goes into glam
yeah,
metal, it goes into industrial, like people that you would never think were influenced by Kiss were influenced by Kiss.
well, Alice Cooper has cited Kiss and vice versa, and they came up at the same time. I mean, Alice Cooper a little before
Right.
that, but these guys have talked about basically how each one influenced the other. I mean, these really the only kind of two shock rockers doing things throughout the 70s.
Yeah.
But again, it just shows you how influential that they could influence their peers at the
Mhm.
time, but then also an entirely new generation that came out through the 80s. They're essentially the first glam band kind
Yeah.
of a thing.
Yeah.
And, it's makeup is different, the style is different and everything, but it was like you can be more on stage. You can put on a show and a presence and a thing
Mhm.
of that nature. And then, of course, it was taken and done further when Van Halen and other bands came out and so forth. But then you've got bands in the 90s that have been influenced by these guys.
Right.
And it just keeps going. I mean, there's groups that are coming out today that continue to cite Kiss.
Definitely. And it comes back to this record. It comes back to these songs. These are rock and roll songs. Like you were saying, Strutter
Hmm.
and Firehouse and Cold Gin. I mean, they're just classic rock and roll songs. And I want to say something too. Kiss toured a lot with Rush, and a lot of people might not know that Kiss sort of took Rush under their wings.
Hmm.
And we all know the musicianship that Rush has, right?
Right. Hmm.
Rush looked up to Kiss, and
Hmm.
the reason being because I think they realized what Kiss was doing,
Hmm.
and they realized that Kiss didn't. Well, they took themselves seriously, but
Right.
they didn't take themselves seriously in that sense. And
Sure.
I think that Rush understood what was going on. But my point in this whole thing is that you have a band like Rush who
Hmm.
saw Kiss and realized what they were doing and acknowledged that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, Rush is one of the most technically proficient bands there is, kind of a thing. And I
Yeah,
don't think anyone would ever confuse Kiss as being one of those bands. But, at the core, Rush is still a rock band.
right.
And I don't think it matters. And I would say that about this selection as an album. Are
Right.
there other great albums? Yes. We're not saying that this is the most technically, best of all the different tiers and categories. But for
Right.
what Kiss did, outstanding. You know,
Yeah,
um,
and when you first presented this question to me about the all-time best rock album, like I mean,
mhm,
a lot of albums that went through my head. Like I wanted to pick the Beatles' White Album and Deep Purple in Rock or Deep Purple Machine Head.
right.
But I kept going back to Kiss. And because
Sure.
I mean, when I think rock and roll, I think Kiss. I mean, they had a song called Rock and Roll All Night, for God's sakes. I
Yeah.
mean, they lived and breathed rock and roll.
Kiss is, I'd have to give this one some more thought, and maybe this is its own episode, but I think Kiss invented the anthem.
Yeah.
With rock and roll on, I mean, every album there is a song like that
Yeah.
on there. And that became a huge thing throughout the 80s. And it's, bands look to have, it was the anthem and it was
Yeah.
the ballad.
Right.
And Kiss too, having, later on,
Yeah.
but I think they were instrumental in making the ballad a
But
huge
yeah,
thing.
look at Beth.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
But let's hit on one other thing here.
Right.
There's first of all, the all four members are distinct,
Yeah.
and in this album here, at this point, three of them are singing, right? So Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss.
Right.
Ace Frehley had not yet felt comfortable enough to sing, although he wrote Cold Gin, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Right. So he just wasn't singing yet. That comes a little later. They really had four vocalists and everything at that point. But I think that was one of the key things that made them stand apart. When I
Yeah.
listened to this album here, especially like on Black Diamond, where you have Paul Stanley singing that melodic intro to it, and then it shifts over to the rugged vocals of Peter Criss when it comes in as a hard rock song. And it's, to me, it's that dichotomy. They had three at that time, three distinct voices, but ultimately four distinct voices that would come out of them. And yet somehow this album sounds completely cohesive with all the different vocals and the different musicianship and everything that's on it. They made that work. And I think that's one of the reasons why this album is that great of an album.
Definitely. And, you know, we talk about timeless records, and I really feel like this can be put into that category. Now, does it sound like a 70s record? Yes, it does sound like a 70s record.
A little bit. I mean, the recording of it might put it in that category, but I think these songs are timeless.
Yeah, and I guess where I was going with that too is I like that it gives me, it harkens back to the 70s because sort of it's timeless, but it also is reminiscent. It reminds of the bands that have come before.
Right. No, it's clearly a 70s album in that regard.
Yeah.
It holds that time, that era, everything in that. But I think it's elevated itself beyond that. You can listen to it at any era. You know, that album was a big album for them still in the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s, present.
Right.
You're reading off the songs on the back of that. I think at least 5 of these songs are still in their set list. And you know, Kiss doesn't change their set list very often. So it's not like they rotate and they still play them at different times. Like, no, the hardcore songs, you know, Strutter and Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce, Black Diamond, those are in their set every night. But many times, 100,000 Years, Nothing to Lose, out of the 10 songs that are on here, 8 of them are absolute classics. And the only 2 that are really aren't played all, you know, or on radio or whatever kind of a thing, you've got Kissin' Time, which was a cover song. And I understand why they wouldn't play it because of that. And then you've got Love Theme from Kiss, which every band in the 70s had a theme song, but it's an instrumental. And it's a 2-minute instrumental. So when you really get down to it, all 8 of the original songs on this album are classics. And I agree with what you opened with saying, this album's really a greatest hits.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you were saying, and before we close out the video here, I just want to say too, kind of to piggyback on what you were saying, I think we need to delve deeper into this because I really feel like you were saying Kiss might have written some of the first anthems. I mean, the way Paul Stanley wrote and the way Gene Simmons wrote music. And again, I'm not saying they're the Beatles.
Right.
I'm saying the way that they structured their songs, and especially on this record, bands that followed did the same thing. And then start to have these anthems. And I almost wonder, I think you're on something here, thinking it goes back to Kiss.
Well, I think we have our next episode for the CD and vinyl guys. We're going to discuss who wrote or who invented the anthem, maybe.
Exactly. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for watching. And, you know, give us your thoughts. And it's going to be interesting to see what people say. Because like we were saying in the beginning, I think you either like Kiss or you don't like Kiss. But you can't deny that they definitely, especially with this album, had an influence on rock.
Absolutely.
So, all right, guys. Well, listen, Brendon, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
And again, everybody head on over to Brendon's channel. I'll leave the link below. And soon we'll be doing more episodes.
All right.
Everybody.
Take care.